protecting my home.
You cannot even protect your friends. How can you hope to protect the kingdom? Get into the healing room. No!
There won't be a kingdom to protect if you're afraid to act. The Jotuns must learn to fear me, just as they once feared you.
That's pride and vanity talking, not leadership. You've forgotten everything I taught you. But a warrior's patience.
While you wait and be patient, the Nine Realms laugh at us. If the old ways are done, you'd stand giving speeches while Asgard falls.
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy!
And you are an old man and a fool!
Yes. I was a fool. To think you were ready.
Father.
Hey!
Thor, Odin's son. You have betrayed the express command of your king. Through your arrogance and stupidity, you have opened these peaceful realms and innocent lives to the horror and desolation of war! You are unworthy of these realms, unworthy of your title! You're unworthy of the loved ones you have betrayed. I now take from you your power in the name of my father and his father before. I owed it, our father! Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. As always, I am half of your host, Perry Constantine.
And as always, I am the other half, Derrick Ferguson, coming at you from beautiful downtown Brooklyn.
And I'm here from gloomy, rainy Kagoshima, Japan right now.
Oh, it's raining there?
Oh, yeah, it's like raining nonstop lately. We had more flood warnings like last week or something, so it's just...
Oh, wow. Well, we're cooking. This is
we get some of that too. Like, the rain has been cooling us off, but when it's not raining, then it's scorching.
Yeah, this is like the third day in a row we've had 90-degree weather. And occasionally, we'll get like a thunderstorm in the afternoon, but it's the kind of thunderstorm that doesn't do anything except makes it more humid. So.
Right. Well, next month we have a speech presentations for our students at one of my schools. And normally these summer presentations, we do it in an outdoor setting, like it's terrible because it's always like scorching and it's just like the humidity is ridiculous here in August. So, but this year they finally wised up and they're like, all right, we're going to put it inside a venue where there's actual air conditioning. I'm like, oh, thank God.
No. Okay. Well, cool then. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be good. I'm glad they finally got up to speed with that. Anyway, anything else going on lately?
Nothing much. I'm going to go see my doctor tomorrow because I don't know. I did one of these things. I think I slept wrong or whatever, or I pinched a nerve or something because it's like I've had a pain in my neck for like the last 3 or 4 days. And I don't know if I slept wrong or what. I don't know what it is, but my wife was saying, well, you know what, you need to go see a doctor if it hasn't gone away after a couple of days. So
Yeah, I hate when that happens. That happens to me like once a year or so. It's such a
right. And that's what I figured what it was. I said, well, I must have just slept wrong. But it's one of these things that when I turn my, I can't turn my head too far to the left or the right.
Right.
Because then I get, a pain in my neck, of course. So
yeah. So you got to get him to, whack it back into place.
Yeah, probably that's all it is. He's probably going to whack. Or it might be because it happened to me like a few years ago and he gave me, it was some kind of pills to reduce the inflammation, because he said what I probably did was that I probably pinched a nerve or something like that. And it's some kind of pills that they give you to reduce the inflammation. if
Right.
you have like an aggravated nerve in your neck or something like that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I took that for a couple of days and I was all right. So
That's good. That's good.
we'll see. Yeah, but you know, I'm okay. You know, I just threw that in since you asked. So
Yeah, I've been catching up on some Netflix stuff. So I finished last season of The Flash, and just the other day I wrapped up last season of Supergirl. So it was good to finally get back to those. And you know what? We talked about John Cryer as Lex Luthor before in our Crisis episode, and we were both kind of saying that we didn't really see the appeal of that actor. Like he's okay, but he's nothing special. But in this season of Supergirl, like in the post-Crisis stuff, he plays a really massive role, and he gets much better. He's really starting to grow into the role. I think they're finding more stuff to do with him.
Oh, okay, cool. You know what? I keep saying that I have to sit down and make a schedule, and I have to get caught up on all of my stuff because as it is now, like I said, you know, as we both said in past episodes, there's just too much stuff.
Yeah.
On this thing to catch up on. I watched. What did we watch last night? We watched The Old Guard.
Oh, we saw that the other night too. Greg Rucka. That's a Greg Rucka based on a Greg Rucka book, and he was able to write the screenplay as well.
Yeah, we watched that. You know, because I said, you know, because everybody was talking about it on Facebook. And of course, people would ask me, "Oh, have you seen it yet? Have you seen it yet?" No, I haven't seen it yet. I'm too busy watching other things. So I watched it. You know, it was okay.
I liked it. Yeah, I liked it. I didn't think it was as amazing as everybody was saying it was, but I kind of got my hopes up. But I enjoyed it, and you know, I always love Rucka's stuff. So you know, and it's good seeing it because like the last thing of his that was adapted was Whiteout, which wasn't really that.
I love that movie. Yeah,
it was okay, but it's like he had like no involvement with it. It was just kind of like they bought it and they made the movie, and there was like no press or anything behind it. So, but this one, he was like deeply involved. Like Charlize Theron and the director, they were like very strong advocates for him, and like they asked him lots of questions during in the run up to filming and during the filming and all this kind of stuff. So that was good that they worked all this stuff into it.
It's one of these movies that I think that this other one that I saw a trailer for today with Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Project Power. Yeah, I think there's another one that's going to be a big thing. But I think that because people can't go to the movie theaters and see their summer action blockbuster movies, I think that the ones that we're seeing on Netflix, that's why they're getting a good deal of attention. I can't help but feel that if the theaters were open and people could go to the movie theaters and see movies, I don't know if The Old Guard would be getting all the attention that it has been getting. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe that's just me being cynical.
I think it might because of, you know, it's a pretty good movie. They got a good cast in it and everything. So I think it would be getting the same amount of attention. But like some of the others, you're right. I don't think they would, like the Hemsworth one, Extraction, which everybody loved, and then you got in a fight with the internet about it.
You know what? I'm sorry. To me, it was like watching a video game. It was like watching cutscenes from a video game. You know, I wasn't digging it the way everybody else was. And, you know, everybody just went absolutely gaga over that movie. And I looked at it and I said, yeah, okay, well, whatever.
That was one of those ones where I enjoyed it, but like it was basically like a B action movie. It wasn't anything. Yeah. It was not like what you'd come to expect from Hemsworth.
You know what that would have been? That was like, okay. And see, I hate to sound like the old guy all the time, but the fact is that I am an old guy. I've seen a lot of movies. This was something that Cannon was making back in the 1980s.
Right, exactly.
You know, yeah. I mean, back in the 1980s, this would have been, you know, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. This would have been a Chuck Norris movie, you know, back in the 80s.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So, I mean, story-wise, it's not, you know, it wasn't anything I haven't seen before. The only thing that made it stand out was the action sequences.
Right. Yeah.
Which is really, to me, what the movie was all about, the fights and the stunts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, you know, again, I don't have a problem with. but I didn't go crazy over it like a lot of people. You
Right.
know, and like you said, I got to about that. You know why? Because it's funny because people don't. I don't know. People seem to get a little bit offended when you don't love something as much as they do.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about this before, and yeah, I think that people, you know, they get a little bit resentful when, you know, they love something and they're gushing over it and they go crazy, and you you just look at it and go, meh.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You know what's something that's funny is I did, and this is unrelated, but I did Facebook ads for my my Lucifer book, and
Cool.
and I'm getting these I'm getting these religious freaks commenting on it, and they're like, you know, oh, that like, you know, complaining about the fact that it's a book about the devil and everything, and I'm just like, what the? And I'm trying to wonder, like, how is Facebook targeting these guys when I'm targeting people who specifically like the Lucifer TV show?
Listen, these people will find you. Trust
Yeah.
me. I've had experience with these people before. You know, they
Yeah.
for some reason, because, you know, as far as they're concerned, it's their mission to convert you and to make you see the error of your ways. And no matter what it is or what intentions you have with, they can see the devil in anything.
Yeah.
So, I've had people that I have no idea. And I've asked them, I said, well, what were you doing reading my books anyway? You know the type of stuff that I write. They read it and then they proceed to give me a whole long list of things that they didn't like about it. I said, well, then what did you read it for?
Yeah.
Really? Really, if you didn't like it that much, you should have stopped reading it a long time ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because now I'm thinking that you had no other purpose but to read the whole thing so you could come to me and complain about it.
Right. Yeah.
Which to me is a waste of your time. You could have been reading something that you really liked.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Okay. So I kind of ruined our segue because we were talking about Hemsworth there, and then I jumped to something else because it's just popped up on my Facebook. But anyway,
That's all right. That's all right.
Today we're talking about your pick, which was Hemsworth's big debut, and that's the first Thor movie directed by Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, Kenneth Branagh, who now, it was surprising. I know he's a good director because I've seen him direct other movies. He's directed like a couple of Shakespearean stuff. Matter of fact, that's the first movie I saw him in. I think he did, what was it, Henry V? It was one of them Henrys where he got to do the, you know, the, the Band of Brothers speech.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I know he was a good director, but he kind of surprised me with this one because I didn't expect him to have such a feel for superhero movies. But then again, since he did bring a kind of Shakespearean element to the proceedings on Asgard, I can see why this material would have appealed to him, because you've got the stuff that happens on Asgard and you got the stuff that happens on Earth. And because Asgard is a larger than life realm, the Shakespearean flavor, which goes back to the Lee Kirby days.
Oh, right down to the speech.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I can see why this movie, you know, was right up his alley. And like Thor is like my favorite Marvel superhero, and I was just over the moon with this movie from start to finish.
Yeah. So you being a Thor fan, like, how much did this fit into your image of what the character was? Because I remember, like, there are a lot of this movie got some mixed opinion. Like, a lot of people rank it like toward on the bottom end of the MCU films. So, but how did you feel?
Yeah, you know what? It really kind of surprises me that whenever I talk to people about the MCU movies and how they rank them and stuff like that, usually they put Thor at the bottom. You know, like all three Thor movies, you know, people, they say, oh, I like him better with the Avengers than I do, you know, by himself. You know?
I think by the time they hit Ragnarok, they kind of found the right flavor that worked with YTT and with Hemsworth. And so, like, people rank Ragnarok a lot higher. But Thor and the Dark World, they both they both end up at the bottom rung of most people's lists.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, most people, they love Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm. Now, and to just full disclosure, like my ranking, like Thor and the Dark World usually are in the bottom, but it's not because I think they're bad movies. The only MCU movie I actively dislike is Iron Man 3. But all the other ones, like, I like in different ways. It's just like, it's not that I don't like Thor and I don't like the Dark World. It's just I like the others a lot more.
Well, I know that I talk to when I talk to a lot of people, they rank these movies so low anyway, because I found that a lot of people really don't care for Thor. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, I don't like Thor." Well, I can't relate to him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the relatable thing.
Well, how can you relate to him? I said, well, I have no problem relating to him, and which is something I've discussed with my therapist. So he's told me why I relate to Thor. I'm not going to go into it here because I don't want.
Well, I think most people have been listening to the show for a while. I think they can kind of see the connections there.
Yeah, maybe they can. So but that's usually what I get from people. They say, "Oh, well, I can't relate to Thor. I don't know." But when I was reading, even the comic books, I love the fact that you had Thor. He would be on Earth and he would have adventures with the Avengers, and he would fight guys like the Absorbing Man and the Wrecking Crew and stuff like that. And then, just so you don't get bored, every once in a while he said, "Okay, well, let me go back to Asgard and see what's happening up there." And he'd go back to Asgard and he'd go there and he'd be kicking frost giants in the ass, and Odin would send him on these quests across the universe where he had to because Ragnarok was coming, or Galactus was coming, and Thor would find these alien races and stuff like that. So you had all of this super science space opera stuff that was mixed into Norse fantasy.
And then the Earth-based superhero stuff too.
Yeah. So I liked how to me, Thor as a comic book was never boring because it was always something happening. It was always a new realm that he was going to, or new foes that he was fighting. And like I say, he was either fighting supervillains or he was fighting mythological monsters and everything like that. So, I mean, to me, Thor was, and of course, he had the best hammer. That weapon was the best hammer. That hammer was the best weapon as far as I was concerned. That shit was badass.
Well, I think that scope of it, like you said, like, you had the fantasy stuff, you had the Shakespearean-esque fantasy, you had the space opera stuff, you had the Earthbound stuff, like trying to mix all those together, especially when this was, really the first, movie outside of, this was the first, because basically at the MCU at this point, all you had was Iron Man 2 and Incredible Hulk, and then you throw in Thor. And so like, and Iron Man and Incredible Hulk, they're both very much science fiction based. And then you throw Thor into this mix and he brings all these three different worlds together. And it's, especially at that time when people didn't really expect a lot of this stuff and the idea was superheroes had to be more grounded, Thor's kind of a difficult sell in that space.
Yeah, you know what? Looking at it in hindsight, I think they actually might have benefited if they had waited a little more and brought in Thor late. Because like you said, Thor is a lot to digest, especially if, like you said, okay, you done seen the MCU movies that we've had so far. And like I said, they're very science fiction-y and they take place on Earth.
Right.
Now you're bringing in an entirely whole mythology into what we've already seen. And you're asking for people to digest it, and people are, they're sitting there and they're saying, okay, well, they're waiting for Nick Fury, and, because, okay, where's S.H.I.E.L.D. at? Because I remember when I went to see this in the movie theater, and when Coulson showed up, there was actually a little bit of applause. It was in the theater, because people was, oh, shit, yeah, Coulson, yeah, they was happy. It was a familiar face. They was happy to see a familiar face at last.
Yeah.
So, I think that, in hindsight, they might have waited a little bit more to bring in Thor because it is a lot to digest. I freely admit that. It's a lot. For somebody like me who is familiar with Thor, no, it wasn't, because I could say, okay, I know who Mrs. Thor is, and I know who Loki is, and I know he's really the son of a frost giant, and, I know who Odin is, and I know this and that. But for a lot of people, which is why I think they had that whole narration that Odin does.
Yeah.
Where he explains the concept. And then they have another part with Thor. He's with Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman, who by now has learned how to work with special effects.
Mm-hmm.
And Thor, he also does his little recap of explaining the concept of the 9 worlds.
Right. And he says, your ancestors called it magic, you call it science, but I come from a place where they're one and the same.
Right. And we even have that little thing with Kat Dennings, who is absolutely brilliant in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is where I fell in love with her.
She's going to be back in the 4th Thor movie.
Well, she should.
Yeah,
yeah. You know what? She does. Kat Dennings steals a lot of scenes in this movie without actually stealing them.
Right.
Because she does it like so low key, but she says things like when she says, there's a part with Jane Foster, she's trying to explain something, and then Kat Dennings come out and say, oh yeah, well, it wouldn't be out of the realm of impossibility that the Norse people would have seen your people come down, and with your powers and abilities, they would have assumed that you were God. Right,
because there's that whole thing when Selvig is arguing with Jane and saying like, look, you're talking about mythology and everything, and then Kat Darcy just chimes in, a primitive culture like the Vikings would have seen these guys as gods.
Right, and she says it so offhandedly, and Jane gives her this look like, well, where's this been all this time? Because up to then she's been kind of acting like kind of bubble-headed.
Yeah.
But she does have her moments where she demonstrates that she has a brain under there. She has a brain up under that cap. She's not, which because I didn't know her from. I knew she was in a sitcom,
mm-hmm.
but I never watched it.
That was what, Two Broke Girls, I think?
Yeah, Two Broke Girls.
Yeah, I never saw that either.
I never watched it. So this movie was my first introduction to her. And I really like her. She brings in...
My first introduction to her, I remember I saw her in, there's a movie she did with Downey before the MCU, before Downey did Iron Man. It was, I'm blanking on the name. But it was with Anton Yelchin was in it too, and the actress who plays Stark's mom in Civil War, she was in it too, and Kat Dennings was in it. I'm really blanking on the name right now. It's going to drive me nuts. But it's this great little kind of like indie-esque movie, and it's hilarious. Like Downey plays the principal in this movie, and she plays his daughter.
Oh, okay.
Charlie Bartlett. That's what it was.
Charlie Bartlett. Okay, the name is familiar.
Yeah, and it was a great little movie. And I saw it just because of Downey. And Downey was of course great in it. And Anton Yelchin as well, Kat Dennings, everybody in it was just amazing. It's a really fun little movie. So
okay, I'll have to look it up. Yeah, the name is familiar.
So, but yeah, and you're right. She does kind of like, she does have these, she has so many great moments. Like all the funniest moments in this movie are Dennings.
Yeah. She actually is the comedy relief, but what I like about her is that she's very understated about it. Right. She doesn't make a big deal out of being the comedy relief.
Yeah, and I think they took that a little bit too far in The Dark World when they brought her back in there, because she gets a lot more attention and it's a lot more trying to be funny.
Yeah, but here I appreciate the fact that it's almost like she's off to the side and commenting on the craziness that's going on.
There is that great part where they're in the hospital and Darcy says about Jade, she's like, well, she hit him with his car, and Jade's like, she's like, well, she tased him, and Darcy's like, yes, I did.
Yes, I did. Yeah, exactly. Yes, I did. She owns that. Yeah, no problem. But she hit her. But she's going to make sure that they know that Jane hit her with the car. And like I was saying before, one of the problems I had with Natalie Portman in the Star Wars prequel trilogy that is that She was walking around like the poor girl didn't know where she was at, didn't know what she was supposed to do. And I chalked that up to her inexperience with working with special effects and green screens and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's not only that, but it's also Lucas is not a good director when it comes to dealing with actors. Like,
no, he's not.
He does not like dealing with actors. He likes the technology and stuff. And that's why the best Star Wars it's amazing that the first Star Wars movie was as good as it was, because, he directed that one, I believe. But that's why the second one is so much better, because it was directed by someone else. It was
Irving Kershner.
Irving Kershner directed the second one. Yeah. So when he handed the reins off to someone else, it was someone who actually knew how to work with actors.
I remember a story that Carrie Fisher was telling about what she was saying when they were filming Star Wars. And of course, Mark Hamill, he was a young, inexperienced, and he was looking for his director to direct him. So when they would do a scene, he would go up to, George Lucas, say, okay, well, how was that? And blah, blah, and Lucas was, yeah, fine over there. Yeah, it's okay. And he would just brush him off. And Harrison Ford actually went up to Lucas and said, don't do that to the kid. Mm-hmm. Could you give him a word and direct him like he wants to be directed? And supposedly according to her, they got into a pretty big fight, because Harrison Ford didn't care for his direction the way that George Lucas, directed either, which
Ford, but I mean, like, the great thing about Ford is that, he's not going to take any shit.
No. And actually, if you see, the only reason why he took Indiana Jones' role was that he didn't take it because of Lucas. He took it because of Spielberg.
No, I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, he took it because of Spielberg. Because Lucas wanted, Tom Selleck.
Right. And in fact, Selleck was actually originally cast, I believe, but then he had to drop out because of Magnum. Was it Magnum P.I.?
Yeah, Magnum P.I. Yeah. I mean, he was signed and everything. Harrison Ford was Spielberg's actual first choice all along. He wanted him. But it was Lucas that said, nah, because Lucas didn't want to work with him.
Yeah.
Didn't want to work with him.
Well, in fact, that's one of the reasons they froze Han and Carbonite at the end of Empire, because they didn't know if they could get Ford back to do Jedi.
Yeah, Harrison Ford, for a while there, it did not look bad. If you look at Empire Strikes Back, and I know that people are saying right now, wait a minute, aren't they supposed to be talking about Thor? I promise you, we'll get back to Thor in a minute. If you look at the end of Empire Strikes Back, right, you see Billy D. Williams. He's in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. Go back and watch that movie. He is dressed exactly like Harrison Ford.
Right, yeah.
Okay, that was because, and I know that, black folks, I'm sorry to have to tell you this. The reason for that was that Lando was going to replace Han Solo in the third movie if Harrison Ford decided he wasn't going to come back.
Right, which is why Lando has nothing to do in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. It has nothing to do because everything that he was going to do was given to Han Solo.
Right, yeah. With the exception of blowing up the Death Star, which just kind of feels like tacked on in that movie.
Yeah, well, you know what? I felt that they said, well, you know what? We got to let him do something.
Right, yeah.
Justify the code. Because otherwise, how are they going to explain that Lando just disappears?
Right, yeah.
And
they make him a general, too.
Yeah, well, hey, which is always good. You got perks. Okay, so as promised, folks.
Back to Thor.
We're going back to Thor. Which, despite the digressions, trust me, I'm serious when I say I love this movie. Renee Russo as Mrs. Odin.
Mm-hmm.
What? She has this one part in the movie, and I was watching it last night, and I don't know if it's just me subconsciously tacking on meaning to this scene because, given now what I know, but there's a scene where Odin says something about Thor and Loki being his sons and everything like that, and that he loves them equally, and he's giving that whole thing. And then they cut to Renee Russo. She's got this funny look on her face.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I guess she knows, because of course she knows that, Odin says, you're my firstborn son, and it's something like that. But she gives a look. She looks at Loki, and she gives him a look. So now I'm trying to think, was that a plant all along, or was it just me since I know how that turns out now? how that whole Loki situation turns out is just my subconscious.
I don't think it was I don't think it was seriously planned to lead to something else, but I think when they went back and they did the Dark World, they looked back to Thor and they said, well, look at this moment, look at the way she acts towards Loki, so let's build her up as like the one person in Asgard that Loki truly loved.
Yeah. And you know what? Let's face it, as played by Tom Hiddleston, Loki is the villain it's hard to hate.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, how could no one? It's impossible to hate him, and that's one of the problems with doing Loki in these movies is because Loki in the comics is not as charming, is not as complex as Loki in the movies is.
Yeah.
And you see that how he changes in these movies, right? Like in this one. He's much more like the comic book Loki. In Avengers as well, he's much more like the comic book Loki. But the problem is that Hiddleston was so good in these performances, and everybody loved him so much, they had to keep bringing him back, and they had to find ways to, make excuses to bring him back. So they had to develop him as more of a complex character from that point.
Because here's the whole thing. When they're working together, him and Thor actually make a formidable team.
Right.
Working together. It's just that they can't stay working together for very long.
Yeah.
They can't. But I love the relationship that he has with everybody in this movie. And in a strange way, it's Loki that's kind of ties everybody together.
Right.
Because everything that happens in this movie comes out of him, how he feels about his heritage, which was kept from him, which Odin shouldn't have kept from him, but one of the things I love about Odin is that he's a dick and he don't give a shit how you feel about nothing because, he's Odin.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's his character. Well, I'm Odin. I do what I want to do. But if Odin had sat him down before and said, well, listen, this is who you really are, and this is why I took you, and yada, instead of letting him find out on his own, because Loki always felt that there was something different about him, which I think is another reason why a lot of people sympathize with Loki, because who among us at one time or another has not felt like they was out of place and said, okay, well, I know there's something different about me, but I don't know what it is.
And it's hard to be mad at Loki in a lot of ways because Thor is an arrogant dick in this movie, especially in the beginning. So it's no surprise. So like when you got Odin making this big oath, basically the king of Asgard, when Loki is clearly the more intelligent one, the more strategic one. So I can understand why Loki would be pissed off about that.
Well, yeah, because actually Thor has no business ruling anything. Because Thor basically likes to run around having adventures and, fighting monsters. That's his thing. That's what he likes to do. And when, in the beginning of the movie, he, goes and he picks a fight with the Frost Giants for no reason at all. After Odin has given him all the good reasons why you shouldn't go pick a fight with the Frost
Exactly.
Giants.
It makes him withdraw Thor's coronation because Thor was about to become king, and then after he flips out on Odin about that, Odin's like, no, you're not king. You're not ready.
Yeah, you're not king. Of course not. Because he's clearly demonstrated that he is not worthy, to be king. And therefore, if you're not worthy to be king, you're not worthy to carry Mjolnir, which is why Odin snatches it from him with a great scene. He just said, "Foof," and snatches the hammer back and takes away his powers, and he exiles him to Earth. And then he throws the hammer to Earth to follow him and says, okay, well, whoever is worthy to pick this up can possess the power of Thor. And he flings the hammer to Earth. And of course, now Thor is on Earth. He's got no powers. He's immortal. So now he has to prove that he is worthy so that he can regain his powers and his hammer and save Asgard from his brother who is now sitting on the throne after Odin has fallen into the fabled Odin sleep.
Right, yeah. Now that's an interesting little thing they did in this movie, is the fact that the enchantment only comes after Thor is banished, and then he puts the enchantment on the hammer. And then, it stays on through all the other movies, because when we get to Stormbreaker in Infinity War and Endgame, like that doesn't have the enchantment on it. So that's why other people can use that hammer.
Right.
So I always thought that was kind of an interesting thing, is that, you know, it's not that the hammer was made with this enchantment. It's that Odin put it on specifically to teach Thor humility, and it's just something that stuck with it after that.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things about the movie that I like, that it clears up and it cleans up some of the stuff from, like, okay, for instance, the movie makes it clear that the Asgardians are not gods. They're just this advanced race,
right?
That you know, the ancient Norse folks and the Vikings and stuff like that, they thought they were gods. You know, they worshiped them as gods. I remember way back in my fan fiction days, I wrote an Avengers story, and one of the Avengers says to Thor, you know, well, don't you still go visit this village where they still think that you're a god? And he says, yeah, well, I went back and I cleaned that up, and I told him, no, I'm not really a god. But I like how they did that, you know, that they straightened that whole thing out, that no, they're not gods, they're just this advanced race.
Right.
That some people think it was God. I also like how in this movie, they actually gave Heimdall something to do besides just staying on that damn bridge.
Oh, and sorry, just had to sneeze for a minute there. But yeah, and you know, Idris Elba, like this was before he became Idris Elba. And
you remember the controversy behind that?
Oh my God, that was like the dumbest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So for anyone who's listening, they don't know, there were a bunch of white people who got, you know, super offended because Heimdall was being played by a black actor. And they started like an online petition and all this stuff, and it was just like the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah, they were saying, oh, well, Heimdall can't be black because the Norse gods, they weren't black.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but the movie makes it clear that these aren't the Norse gods. They're not.
And also, you know, saying that the Norse gods weren't black, the Norse gods didn't exist. They're just fictional characters.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, exactly. They were fictional characters right from the start.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, I mean, people really got bent out of shape behind that. I was reading stuff online for that for months after the movie came out.
And you know what I noticed is that people did not get anywhere near as offended about the fact that Tadanobu Asano was playing Hogun.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
I mean, although he does have some Norwegian ancestry, but, you know, he's a Japanese actor, born in Japan, mostly works out of Japan. So, but almost nobody said anything about him.
Yeah, nobody said anything about that.
Nor did they bitch about the fact that, you know, Thor in Norse mythology has red hair, not blonde, or anything like that.
Because even if you go back to the comic books, the Warriors 3, you look at them, and it's quite obvious that none of them are Norse men. You know, like Hogan, he looks like he's like a Mongol.
Right, yeah.
He's got Asian features, even in the Fandral, he looks like he's from England, you know, like he could have been a musketeer or something like that.
Right. Well, Fandral especially was basically Earl Flynn.
Right, exactly. Volstagg was Germanic. You know, that's how. So I mean, they weren't Norse gods or anything like that. So that, you know, so that goes back. Matter of fact, I got a charge out of that thing with them making some of the main characters that we see in this movie, you know, multiracial.
Yeah.
You know, I had no problem with that, and I applaud that decision, you know, to do that. You know, I also like the fact that they didn't treat Volstagg. One of the things I never liked about the Thor comic book was the treatment of Volstagg and how there was the tendency, depending on who was writing him, mind you, he was treated just as a funny fat man.
Right, yeah.
And I never really liked that because I could not see guys like Thor and especially Hogan, who took being warriors seriously, just having a funny fat guy hang out with them.
Right.
You know, so I like how in this movie, they treated Volstagg, you know, with the more, you know, he does have his lighter side, especially when it comes to the food and stuff like that. But he is shown to be a valuable member of the team.
Yeah.
for the short amount of time that they have in the entire Thor series, because the Warriors 3 kind of get the shaft.
And it's Ray Stevenson, who was previously, before this movie, he was the Punisher in Punisher Warzone. So it was kind of cool. And I didn't even recognize him at first.
Neither did I. I didn't realize it was Ray Stevenson until I read the credits at the end. And I said, oh, shit, that was Ray Stevenson? Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And he does a great job. There is that scene where, he's eating all this food, and Fandor's like, in this time you managed to consume 4 boars and 3 casks of ale and all this stuff, and he gets pissed off, and Stevenson has this great line: "Do not mistake my appetite for apathy."
Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, so I really when I listen again, one of the charm of seeing these movies is that I finally get to see things on screen that I never thought that I would get to see. I never thought I'd get to see an Asgard that looks like the one that's in this movie.
Well, and that's an interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because they now I don't remember, as I recall, I've only read a few of the Thor stuff, so I may not be remembering this correctly. But the Rainbow Bridge in the comics, it is an actual rainbow, right?
Yeah, it's actual rainbow.
So this, I thought they found a really clever way to translate that, because I was thinking, how are they going to handle the Rainbow Bridge? And they found a really clever way to do it.
I love the way how when you look at the bridge closely, and I was watching the movie last night on, of course I have it on Blu-ray, as I do all the Marvel movies. I'm bragging, yes. But when you look at it closely, you'll see it looks like there's circuitry.
Right, yeah.
That's running in the bridge. And it's like kind of like electrical sparks and pathways and neurons and electrons and stuff like that. I kind of like how it gives the impression that the bridge itself is thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of course it connects to the Bifrost, which is basically a super Star Trek transporter. It's a Stargate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also, and it does have that multicolored feel to it. So it is basically like a rainbow bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did like that, how they worked that in. And I gotta say, I did like that they didn't portray Asgard as something out of a Tolkien novel, right?
Oh, thank God, yeah.
They display it's this high-tech fantasy world, right? So they've got, they fight with swords and everything, but they also have these high-tech elements. And it's just, but they're done in the style of fantasy. So it kind of like how in Black Panther they're using spears and everything like that, and they're using more traditional African tribal weaponry and customs and that kind of stuff, but they reworked it with a sci-fi edge to it.
Yeah, it's technology that's incorporated into the traditional African culture.
Right, and they did the same thing here with the Norse stuff, and I thought that was a really good way to handle it.
Yeah, where the Asgardians, they're basically like this warrior race, but they've incorporated these high-tech elements into their armor and the spears that they have and all this kind of. Yeah, I mean, it's really neat. And you know what? That also comes into the fact that when Thor comes, I hate these movies where they have somebody that's from another planet and they're dropped on Earth and they bumble around like they don't know what they're doing. Right. Thor is an intelligent guy. He knows about Earth and everything like that. It's not like he looks at a car and he doesn't know what a car is.
Right.
He knows what stuff is. So I kind of like that aspect, and it really cut through a lot of BS when, the only thing he just wants to know is, okay, well, where's my hammer? That's all he wants to know when he wakes up. He's not, well, where am I? And who are you? And, oh, what are these strange clothes that you're wearing? No, he knows what clothes are.
Right, exactly, yeah. And just touching on that as well, the design, I noticed, I had never really picked up on it before, but I was just noticing it now, is that how much of because they're not direct translations of the comics, the outfits and stuff and the design.
Oh no.
But there is so much you can tell they're very clearly Kirby inspired. All those crazy circles and lines Kirby always loved putting on his costume designs. All of that is present in their armors. And I was sitting there watching oh wow, I never even noticed how much Kirbyisms there are in this movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean Thor's armor to me is like a nice little. It's like they took the best elements from Kirby and from Walt Simonson.
Well, you know what? You know what I noticed is that the armor that like Thor and the other Asgardians wear, it's much more like the New God stuff. Like that kind of design work. It reminded me a lot of what you see in the New Gods work.
Yeah, and it's functional.
It is, yeah.
This is armor. Because these guys go into battle and stuff like that. So of course they're wearing armor, and the stuff actually looks heavy, and it looks like it can protect you in, like a fight. Especially when they had that wonderful fight. The fight that starts off the movie where they go to the planet where the the frost giants live, right? And they had that fight scene. Man, that was like right out of the comics.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, when I saw that, I was amazed because I was wondering, how are they going to do all this stuff with Thor? Like, that fight scene in particular, they went full out, and it was just like a comic book.
Yeah, okay, you have the fight with the Destroyer that's at the end, but for me, that fight right there with the Frost Giants, that was the best fight that was in the movie.
Yeah. When he's like twirling the hammer and he flies through that Frost Giant, I'm just like, holy fuck.
Yeah, because you actually see the whole range of Thor's powers in that scene where he just pulls down the lightning when all of the Frost Giants are rushing him, and he gives that little silly stupid grin, and he just pulls down the lightning and boom, and the ground explodes for like miles around. I said, see, now that's Thor.
Yeah.
That right there, Patricia said, what are you laughing about? I said, because that right there, that's Thor.
And did you ever expect that you would see something that close to the Thor comics going into this movie?
No, absolutely not.
And
absolutely.
I also gotta say, like, this trailer was one of the best MCU trailers. Because do you remember the trailer? It opens up with Coulson, with the Coulson interrogation, and you only see Coulson at first. And I think maybe you don't even see him. I think maybe you only just hear his voice at first. And he's saying, and he's talking about like all these things, like, so where did you receive your training? Chechnya, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He's like, there are a lot of groups who would pay a lot of money for a good mercenary. Like, you can say, who are you? And then it cuts to Hemsworth as Thor looking up, and you're like, and I love that like mystery they build up in the trailer there.
Oh, okay. See, I haven't seen the trailer in ages, but now you want me to. Now I got to go back and look at it.
But, it was an amazing way of like just showing, like, because this is like, we take it for granted as comic book fans because we've known Thor for basically all our lives, but this was, basically the world's first introduction to Thor. Like, Hulk, people had known about. Iron Man, people had heard of. He had the cartoon and everything. Captain America, of course, people had heard of. But Thor was like really the big enigma, like the big extra. Because the only other thing that Thor had really been in at this point was you had the Avengers cartoon on the time, and then you had his appearance in one of the Hulk TV movies years ago, which probably nobody remembers.
Yeah, no, nobody remembers that because that thing was from what, the 70s. Yeah,
right.
So
yeah.
Nobody would remember that. Yeah, and that scene right there where they had the fight with the Frost Giants, to me, is crucial for the rest of the plot because you don't really appreciate what Thor has lost unless you see what kind of power the guy, had.
Right.
Then when you see what kind of, you say, whoa, this guy, the guy can pull down lightning. He's killing Godzilla's, cousin and, and all this kind of stuff. So then when he loses his power, you say, oh shit, because now this guy has really lost something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's a very crucial thing. Another scene that, of course, made me smile in here, not only when Coulson showed up, but we see Hawkeye.
Yes, I freaked out when I saw that in the theater. Like when he even just the other night when I was rewatching it, like I was sitting there with Coulson, and we're sitting there watching it, and then when he says I need eyes up top, and then you see the hand, they go for the rifle and then they go for the bow and arrow, and I'm like, yeah, Hawkeye, and she looks at me, she's like, how many times have you seen this movie? I'm like, I don't care, it's Hawkeye.
I don't care, it's Hawkeye. Yeah, it's Hawkeye. And then he goes up there and he's got the bow. And I love the scene because Thor is, trying to get to the hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying to Coulson, okay, well, do you want me to take this guy out, or are you just going to send more, guys for him to beat up?
Yeah, he is so Hawkeye in that scene.
Yeah,
like do you want to send more guys for him to beat up? And then he's like, you better call it soon, Coulson, because I'm starting to root for the guy.
yeah. He said, I'm actually starting to root for this guy. He said, it is a low-key introduction to the character. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, because when I saw it in the movie theater, I of course freaked out. I said, oh shit, it's Hawkeye. You know, for people who don't know the character and didn't understand, they wouldn't know why I was freaking out.
And they're probably wondering, why is this SHIELD agent using a bow and arrow instead of
exactly.
a rifle?
Because like I said, me and Patricia went to see it, and she said, well, why wouldn't he take the gun? And I said, shh, I'll tell you later. Just watch the movie. And she just sighed and said, okay. She went back to eat the popcorn. Because usually before we go to these movies, I had to give her a tutorial as to who the characters were. But of course, the first time I saw it, I didn't know Hawkeye was going to be in it, So
I would known he was going to be in it because I had heard, I'm not sure if it was confirmed or if it was just rumors, but I had heard that Jeremy Renner was going to be have a cameo as Hawkeye in this.
Yeah.
But knowing that's going to happen and then seeing it and having it done in such an awesome way was a totally different situation.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I don't care how many times I see it. I say, oh shit, it's Hawkeye.
Yeah. Well, that whole sequence when he breaks into the shield camp, that is so well done. Like, I love that sequence where he's taking out all these guys, and even it shows that even without his powers, Thor still knows how to kick some ass.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I think that was one reason why that scene was put there, to let us know that, Thor is not ineffectual without his hammer, because even in Thor Ragnarok, Odin even tells him that. He said, well, are you the god of hammers or are you the god of thunder?
Right.
He said, it's not the hammer, it's you, the power is in you, and I'm watching this movie last night, and I'm watching it, and I have to tell you, I got very nostalgic and misty-eyed for a minute, thinking, because of course we've seen the whole story arc that Thor has had and his father and Loki and the Asgardians as a whole. And revisiting this movie again, I was thinking, wow, Thor had really come a long way from how he was in this movie as to how we eventually see him in Endgame.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think he goes through more character development than any of the other Avengers.
Yeah, especially when we're talking about the big three, which is him, Iron Man, and Captain America. I think that out of all three of them, Thor goes through the most emotionally and psychologically, than any other character that we see that's in the MCU.
Right. I mean, that's not saying that the others don't. They do. It's just it's not as extreme as what Thor goes through, because Stark goes from being very, very, he goes from selfish to selfless, basically. But he still struggles with it. Almost every single movie is about Tony Stark, deciding to be selfless. And Captain America, he goes from being completely trusting in institutions to becoming more independent minded.
Yeah.
But Thor goes from even in this movie, there's such a big change in his personality. He goes from very haughty and arrogant and dismissive. When they give him clothes after they and you get the Don Blake sticker on his shirt and everything, and they ask him, how do the clothes fit? And he's just very dismissive way. He says they will suffice.
Yeah.
But it's only after he's spending time with these people, and even up until going to the SHIELD base, he's very arrogant. He's I got this. I can take care of everything, and I'm going to, I'm going to fly out and everything, he's. But he's so arrogant and sure of himself, which is But it's not until he tries to grab the hammer and he realizes, like, oh, shit.
And you know when the change comes, at least where I see the change come, is when he's sitting down and he's talking to Jane Foster, and
Well, it's those two conversations, first with Selvig in the bar, and then with Jane after that too.
yeah.
Like, these are really the big turning points, because that's when he realizes, like, whoa, shit, I don't know everything. I'm not, I'm not perfect.
Yeah, because he gives him back the book.
Yeah.
And he says, listen, he said, I couldn't get everything. He said, but I tried to get some. Just the fact that he went through the effort of getting that small thing as a book, but it means a lot to her.
Right.
And it meant a lot to me because I'm saying, okay, the guy's starting to change now.
Mm-hmm.
He's thinking about somebody else besides him, which is the whole point of, really, once you get down to it, the whole point of Thor is that he learns how to think of other people and not just himself.
Okay, so now you being a Thor fan, like, you are very familiar with, especially back in the Simonson days and all that, and especially the Lee Kirby days, Thor had a human identity, right? He and Dr. Don Blake were sharing the same body, basically.
Yes, he did. Because remember, Thor was created back in the 1960s, where, of course, every superhero had to have a secret identity.
Right.
And so it was a guy named Dr. Don Blake. He was on vacation in Norway. We don't know why. He just went to Norway for a vacation. And through a series of mishaps, he gets trapped in a cave. And there's a cave in, and he's stuck in the cave. And he finds this walking stick, that's in the cave. And he says, okay, maybe I can use this to get out of the cave. And he's banging the stick against the boulders that's keeping him inside the cave. And while he's doing that, of course, bam, and the stick transforms into the hammer, and he's turned into Thor. And he reads on the hammer, whosoever holds this hammer, blah, 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 blah. And he realizes, oh, well, I've become Thor.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, there was a fear, because all of the Asgardian stuff and the super science and all that other stuff didn't come until later on. For a while there, Thor was a conventional superhero. Don Blake, if there was some trouble that was in the city, he whacked the walking stick on the ground, he turned to Thor, and he'd fly away, and, he beat up on the supervillain of the month, and then he'd come back, he banged the stick, and he turned back into Dr. Don Blake. And there was a little sexual tension going back and forth with his nurse, Jane Foster, who was secretly in love with Dr. Don Blake. But for some reason, he didn't want to get with Jane. I never really did understand that. I never really understood the whole thing with Jane Foster going on, So, but as time went on and Thor became a more popular character, and I kind of suspect that it was probably more Jack Kirby than Lee that started introducing these super science elements and the science fiction and the fantasy and all that kind of stuff, and Lee just went with it, because it was selling books, and it differentiated Thor from the other comic books that they had, that Marvel was producing at that time, because this was on an epic scope and scale that if you were also into Lord of the Rings, which was also very big at that time, and Michael Moorcock and Robert E. Howard was all very, all that kind of stuff was becoming very popular at that time. And Thor kind of fitted right into there, the way that it was being written by Lee and Kirby, with all of the fantasy and space opera elements mixed up. So if you were fans of one, you got into Thor. Because a lot of people, because I knew people that normally didn't read superhero stuff, but they read Thor. Right.
So no, how did you feel about the fact that they they cut out Don Blake, basically? Like, is that something you, being a fan of the Thor comics, is that something you missed watching this movie, or is it something that you didn't feel like it was a big deal? What were your thoughts?
No. First of all, because I mean, we're at the point now where actually secret identities is really something that don't exist in comic books any longer. I don't think. I don't
Well,
think
they
really.
do, but it's just it's much more character appropriate.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So it's
right.
like you have the street level heroes, like you got Spider-Man, you've got Daredevil, they've got secret identities. But
Right,
Batman,
exactly.
that kind of stuff. Superman, even though Superman's not really, but Superman, he needs a secret identity for keeping himself grounded, basically.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Spider-Man and Daredevil, they need their secret identities because, you know, to protect their loved ones. And as they've found out over the long course of their careers, when someone does find out, everybody tries to kill him because, you know, as we all know, the best way to become a Spider-Man villain is to be somehow connected to Peter Parker.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's all you got to do. Just because Peter Parker has the worst taste in choosing friends.
You know, and that was actually an argument that I think it was Lee and I think it was Ditko they had about the Green Goblin was when they were trying to decide who to make him, because Lee wanted him someone in Peter Parker's life, whereas I think it was Ditko. I'm if I'm wrong, you know, someone can correct me, but I'm almost positive it was Lee and Ditko. And Ditko wanted him to be someone completely unconnected to Peter Parker, which, you know, even though we got a lot of great stories out of Norman Osborn being the Green Goblin, I kind of understand Ditko's point of view, because then that thing was picked up where every single person, almost every single villain Spider-Man fights is somehow connected to Peter Parker.
I think you're right. I think that was Ditko. I have heard that story too.
Mm-hmm.
That it was a big thing that Ditko just wanted it to be like a complete nobody. That was his thing. He wanted it to be a nobody. You know, Peter Parker snatches his mask off and says, "Okay, well, who are you?"
Right.
But see, I understand why Stan Lee wanted to do that, because of the heavy soap opera influence
Right.
that he brought to Spider-Man. Because Spider-Man was basically a soap opera with a superhero as his star.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
So yeah, so I understand why Lee wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Because that was like a revelation that you would have seen in the soap opera
Mm-hmm.
of the day. Oh my God, it's really you. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I understand that. So but no, I didn't have a problem with that, because there's some things that you outgrow. Like for instance, when Thor first appeared, he had a weakness.
mm-hmm.
He always had to hold his hammer. If the hammer was out of his hand for 60 seconds, he would turn back to Don Blake.
Right.
Why? The only reason was because at that time it was thought that every superhero had to have some sort of weakness.
Right. He was very much in the DC vein of superheroes, whereas, like, you know, Superman was vulnerable to kryptonite. Green Lantern's ring couldn't affect anything yellow. Wonder Woman lost her powers if she got tied up, or I think it was something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was all kind. Yeah. It was all. That was the convention at that time that was felt. Of course, after a while, they just did away with that because it was silly. And they actually did away with Don Blake because they went through a whole series of stories where they were trying to explain, okay, well, where did Don Blake come from in the first place? Was he just an identity created by, because for the longest time, you thought that, okay, Don Blake was the human and that he just turned into, he was like Captain Marvel. He turned into a bigger, more powerful version of himself.
Right.
You know, and Thor wasn't his own person, but then, you know, when he was Thor, he started speaking in the Shakespearean, you know, manner with the thees and thous and have at thee varlet and everything like that. People say, oh, okay, where is this coming from now? You know, he never spoke like this before. So of course now they had to explain, you know, well, was Don Blake a separate person? Was he something created by Odin? Which I think is eventually how they resolved that thing, that it was identity created by Odin, for the same purpose as in this movie, to teach Thor humility, which is why he made him a doctor.
Oh, I think they undid that later on, because I do remember like it's you know, become twisted and convoluted because it's been changed one way and then changed back the other way, and you know, this stuff is, as we said before, this type of stuff is cyclical in comics. Like, and because I remember in for a long time, like, Thor had stopped using a human identity. Right, like I think it was during the Simonson run was when they really kind of did away with the secret identity stuff.
Yeah,
and that continued on through, like, basically up until the 90s when Thor was canceled during Onslaught and all that. And then when they relaunched the Thor title under Dan Jurgens, they did give him a human identity, but it wasn't Don Blake. There was a paramedic named I think it was Jake Foster got caught in like the crossfire of a battle that Thor was having with the Destroyer, and there was some, I can't remember the details, but there was some sort of energy transference or something, and Thor became bonded with Jake Olsen.
Because the guy was dying, and in order for him not to die, Thor said, "Okay, well, I have to bond with this guy so that he, won't die." In other words, Thor was touched by his heroism and didn't feel that the guy deserved to die.
Right.
So he bonded with him, and for a while there, that guy was like Thor's secret identity.
And there was a twist on that because, unlike, if I'm not mistaken, the Don Blake thing, Don Blake was a separate character, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in this case, he was still Thor even when he was Jake Olsen. Like, Jake Olsen was basically nowhere to be found, and Thor was basically kind of like cursed to live out Olsen's life. And so that was the thing that went on for a while in the comics, and then eventually they resolved that. And then then they went back to not having given him an identity, and then Ragnarok came, and everyone thought the Asgardians were dead. And again,
there was even a period where Thor, he was Thor, but he was walking around, like a human being and everything. I think his real name, he was using the identity of Sigurd Jarlson.
Oh, right. Yeah.
A construction worker. And as a nod to Superman, when he was Sigurd Jarlson, he would just wear a pair of glasses.
Right, yeah. And he had his
hair back in a ponytail.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, I remember I was reading the Mutant Massacre trade about a few months back, and they had some Thor stuff in there too. And I remember like him as Sigurd Jarlson, like hanging out with like his friends and everything, and like his buddies' kids and all that.
Yeah, he was concerned, and he carried around Mjolnir in an oversized lunch pail or something stupid like. Yeah, but he carried it around, in case he had to, go do Thor stuff while he was on the job.
Right. Yeah, and then when J. Michael Straczynski relaunched the Thor comic book in the several years back, he brought back Don Blake. And so Don Blake was brought back in that, and he was a character all throughout Straczynski's run. And then I think eventually they got separated again. I don't know if Blake's been seen since then because he wasn't in any of the Jason Aaron stuff.
And actually in this movie, when the Stellan Skarsgård character, he goes to get him from S.H.I.E.L.D., which I'm still not sure. I believe that Coulson just let him take him just to see.
Oh, he did, because there's that thing where it says it's falsified data.
You're right, falsified data. But he goes in, and Coulson said, "Well, who's this?" "Oh, well, he's Dr. Don Blake," Mm-hmm. So I thought it was a nice little nod to, the original that for whatever reason, they did give Thor and they let him use the name of, Dr. Don Blake.
Well, they do make that point when he finds the "Hi, my name is Don" sticker, and, he's like, "Who's this?" And she says, "Oh, that's my ex. Good with patience, bad with relationships." And, but originally in earlier drafts, like Don Blake was actually going to be a character in the movie. And Kevin McKidd almost got the part.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But then they eventually decided to write Blake out and just have the nod to him in those two scenes.
And speaking of Stellan Skarsgård, may I just say that having him and Anthony Hopkins, as we have said so many times before, ad infinitum. I know people are getting sick of us here saying this, but I'm sorry, folks. It's a truism. You and I have talked at great length about how much casting is so important to these movies. And the contribution that both Anthony Hopkins and Stellan Skarsgård, bring to this movie cannot be emphasized enough. Because, we're talking about guys who, I can't think of any more two prestigious actors to put together in one movie than those guys, these guys have been in some serious shit, to put it bluntly.
Well, not only that, but also having Kenneth Branagh directing it. Like, when they announced Kenneth Branagh was directing, I'm like, how the hell did they get Kenneth Branagh to direct this movie?
Yeah. That's wait a minute, Kenneth Branagh. Wait a minute, okay. And see, again, when you announce names like that that are attached to a
Mhm.
superhero movie, it makes people pay attention.
Yeah.
And they say, oh shit. They say, okay, let's see. Okay, we don't know who Tom Hiddleston is, and we don't know who Chris Hemsworth is. But when you say Anthony Hopkins and Kenneth Branagh and Stellan Skarsgård
People sit up
are
and
in a
take notice.
superhero movie, or in a superhero, I don't care who you are. You sit up and pay attention, and you give the movie a little bit more respect than you would otherwise.
And you know what? And Anthony Hopkins is amazing as Odin. Like, I cannot think of anybody else who could play this part.
Oh yeah, Odin, and Odin is one of my favorite characters. And I mean, Anthony Hopkins. This is just how I visualize Odin would be. He plays him perfectly with the right balance.
He looks like he stepped right out of the comics.
It looks exactly like he stepped out of it, especially when the scene. He's on the throne with that big, huge honking horned helmet and the golden armor and everything like that. That's, oh my God. He looks just like a Kirby drawing come to life.
Exactly, yeah. And you know what's funny? When Hemsworth and Hopkins saw each other in full armor for the first time, Hopkins said, God, there's no acting required here, is there?
You know, there's not. And you know what? They do look like father and son.
They do, yeah. Well, you know what? There's this funny thing. I think I mentioned it before, but they showed these three images side by side with Cate Blanchett and Tom Hiddleston and Anthony Hopkins when he was younger. He had dark hair, and then Chris Hemsworth. They're like, "Are we sure Loki was the adopted one and not Thor?"
Yeah, right. Seriously, because I know it. I know it's a small thing, but it always bugs me when a movie gives us characters that's supposed to be related and they look nothing alike.
Right, yeah.
So I always appreciate it when, a movie puts actors who are supposed to be father and son or mother and daughter or brother and brother, and they actually do look like, okay, well, they could be brothers or mother and daughter or I mean, whatever. So
now here's a great scene too. So that scene when in the banishment scene when Thor is yelling at Odin, and then Odin shouts back at him, "You are a vain, cruel boy," or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, Branagh told Hopkins to improvise his reactions. And
really?
So when they were filming it, so Hopkins he improvised all that dialogue. And apparently, like, after the scene was, and when the scene made, the cast people who were standing there watching the scene being filmed were sobbing. And because it was so emotional, like the way he was playing it. And then Hemsworth and Hiddleston, they said that they had to struggle to keep themselves composed while they were on camera. And then Hiddleston went up to Hopkins afterwards, and he's like, "That was amazing." He complimented it, and Hopkins just said, "Ken's fantastic, isn't he?"
Anthony Hopkins is a trip. There was a lot. I was what, you know what, and I don't know if that's where he got it from, but I was watching him as Odin, and there was a lot of what he did as Odin that reminded me of Peter O'Toole in The Lion in Winter, where he played a king. Peter O'Toole played a king, and I don't know. And Anthony Hopkins was in that movie too. That was like one of his first major roles, which he got because of Katharine Hepburn, who kind of mentored him, when he was a young actor. And I don't know if that's exactly where he got it from, but there's a lot of Peter O'Toole I saw in Anthony Hopkins, because I think that Peter O'Toole played a king in like 4 or 5 of his movies, and very few actors played a king as well as Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole played a king like he was born to play, like a king.
Also, something else about just taking it back to Branagh for a second here is that I'm just reading here in the trivia on IMDb that Branagh was apparently a Thor fan, like ever since he was a kid, and I'd never known that. Like, you'd never expect like someone like Kenneth Branagh to be a comic book fan, but apparently, like, he was a huge. And it does make sense though, like that. It makes sense why he does all this Shakespeare stuff. If that was probably what got him into Shakespeare in the first place.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of. And it's kind of, people look at you like you're crazy, when you say stuff like this. But comic books is what led me to a lot of what people would normally think of as highbrow sort of culture.
Right.
A lot of that, like my first exposure to opera was Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then I went on to, and a lot of, stuff that I read in comic books, like like I got into Shakespeare from reading Thor.
Mm-hmm.
I got into reading science fiction and stuff like Michael Moorcock and Arthur C. Clarke, and because a lot of the stuff I read in comic books.
Right. Well, the thing people don't forget is that, especially when you're getting into like the 70s and beyond, a lot of the comic book writers who were coming up at that time, they were educated guys, right? They had literary degrees and stuff like that, or they were very well read, and they used that stuff in their comics. Like Chris Claremont cribbed from tons of stuff, like the whole idea of the Morlocks, that was from science fiction novels. The Brood was basically just alien, his way of introducing aliens into the Marvel universe.
And I can't help but feel, and I've had this discussion with other people before. Some would tell me that I'm a snob, and others that think I'm crazy, and others that say, well, you may have a point there, because you had people that created pop culture back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And like you said, they were well-educated people. They were well-rounded people. They drew on a variety of things to create their books and their movies and their comic books. You had comic book writers that was just, there was a reason why this stuff became popular in, colleges and stuff like that, because, it wasn't written specifically for kids, it was supposed to be written for a certain age group. But when you had stuff like Marvel that came along and took chances and wrote on another level besides entertainment, that's when they entered the mainstream pop culture. But the point, let me not get off my point. The point I'm trying to make is that people that created pop entertainment back then drew from a lot of different things. You have people now, who write and direct, let's say they fall into a certain genre. Let's pick on the horror movies, right? The reasons why they make the same kind of horror movies is that basically they got into horror movies because that's all they did. They just watched horror movies.
Right.
They didn't read anything else. They didn't read extensively. They didn't, so they're only drawing from what they know, Comic book writers now, they grew up reading, Frank Miller and Chris Claremont. So that's all they want to do. Now, it could be wrong, but that's what it seems to me like a lot of times. I was reading today that there's yet another comic book series based on The Watchmen that's coming out.
Oh, they do? I didn't hear about that. But
Rorschach?
Oh, no, I didn't hear about that.
It's supposed to be a 12-issue series. Marvel, not Marvel. DC's putting out under their Black Label imprint.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it right now. I think that might be, I wonder if that's based off because they introduced a new version of Rorschach in the Doomsday Clock series, which I just read a few weeks ago, which is actually really good. So I'm not sure if this is the... Oh, and it's Tom King doing it, so I'm willing to give that a chance, because Tom King's a really excellent writer.
Oh, okay. Well, if you say so, I'll go, because I'm unfamiliar with it. But I'm just saying that this is another example of them going back to the well yet again and just writing something that
part of that is also, the editors who are working in these systems, because these are businesses, and they're going to do stuff based on what a lot of it too is, just like these are the fans that they have as well. So you gotta kind of appease those guys, because when you do try, this is one of those things where we talked about where the fans don't really know what they want.
Yeah, that's true.
And the DC and Marvel, like they keep trying to cater to this same group of readers, basically, who they never know what they want.
Well, at this point, they're trying to stay afloat.
Well, I don't think it's so much they're trying to stay afloat. I think it's just like they I think it's just that they're in this mode of doing business because, I mean, DC and Marvel, it costs for AT&T and Disney to keep these companies open. Like, even if they didn't sell a single comic book, to keep these companies open, it would cost like the money they find in the seat cushions.
Yeah, I got you.
Right. So I don't think it's a matter of staying afloat because the DC and Marvel, like the AT&T and Disney, they don't care if DC and Marvel never makes a dime, right? Because what they want is they see DC and Marvel as basically, brand development for their movies and TV shows.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that argument, and I heartily concur.
Yeah. So like they can never make. So it's not even a matter of that. Like I don't think, the head of Bob Iger, he probably doesn't even realize the comic books are still being published. Right. Right. It's like to him, it's like the pamphlets they print up at Disney World. That's what.
Just to show you that, I mean, the power that they have is that if you ask the average person that's on the street, what comic company, they're either going to say DC or Marvel. They don't know it, because that's who everybody. I remember that when, what movie did I saw? That was Aquaman. A lot of people thought that was a Marvel movie.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They didn't know it was I saw it was DC. And you know what some people said? Well, what's the difference?
I remember someone asked me one time, like, how come Batman's not in the Avengers? And I'm like, because that's a different company.
Yeah. Most people don't even understand the difference between, well, it's people dressed in costumes,
Right, yeah.
Well, well, who cares who's in, really, So, so it's not like, it's really, I tell you, if you had told me way back in the 70s that comics would be where it is now, where, I wouldn't have believed, because of course, back then I thought comics was going to be, in the way that they were at that time, was going to be around forever.
Right, yeah.
I did not know they were going to morph into what they are now, and that, of course, now.
Well, I mean, even the writers back then didn't think the comics would be around forever.
No.
And so that's why they didn't care about creator rights or anything like that, because these creators, they didn't realize that they didn't expect these characters to be living on 50 years later.
Well, that's why you don't see anybody. I mean, when was the last time somebody created a new character for DC or?
Oh, there have been a bunch. There have been a bunch. Oh yeah,
really?
Oh yeah. I mean, you had over in Marvel, they had they got the new Ms. Marvel character. They got they introduced Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. They brought him back and paired him up with a new character named Moon Girl. They did Ironheart, the Blue Marvel, a bunch of other stuff that are still being created. Lots of new characters still being created. DC has a whole bunch as well. They have like a new
wait. I'm not talking about just taking the name of an old character and just giving it to somebody else. I'm talking about a completely brand new character.
No, there are those too. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a character. Brian Bendis created this character. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's an original character that I think he introduced in his Superman book, and then they gave her own title. I'm trying to look it up now. Naomi, that's the name. That's the character's name. So yeah, DC's got this new imprint called Wonder Comics, and it's it's directed more towards younger readers. They've got like a new Young Justice series in there.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, they're still creating new characters, but the thing is, after all the stuff with Jack Kirby and everything, there is more. They are giving more residuals for this stuff now, but it's not like it was before, where after they were done with the book, they never saw another dime. They do get some residuals and stuff like that, but it's still not where it should be. Where they should be getting a significant cut of these movies and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I know I read an article not long ago, the other day, where Grant Morrison was saying that he wished that his name was on the Doom Patrol,
yeah,
show. that they have. He said because he said, hey, let's be honest. He said most of that stuff is mine. That
Oh,
stuff
it's pretty
that
much
yeah.
all his work.
It's all his, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. And even I posted this thing the other day with Diane Guerrero. I think I'm probably totally mangling the pronunciation of her name, but she plays Crazy Jane and the series. And
I saw that.
Yeah, and they sent her a question. And they said, like, well, did you read any of the Doom Patrol comics? And then she filmed this video for like this giant Morrison omnibus.
Oh my God, that thing was huge.
She's like, I read this every night.
I said, where did she find that thing from?
Oh yeah, DC's got a few of those. They got that the Morrison one. They got one for Watchmen as well. Dark Knight Returns. They got a bunch of those out.
Oh, okay.
All right. So anyway, we're kind of drifting off on tangents again, but I did want to talk about Coulson in this. Is that I love how in all these movies nothing phases Coulson.
Nothing. Not a thing.
Like even when the destroyer comes to Earth, and the guy who's playing Jasper Sitwell, he asks him, like, is that one of Stark's? And then Coulson's just like, I don't know. The guy never tells me anything. and then he sees the destroyer's face is starting to glow, and Coulson's like, here we go.
Yeah, shit, here we go. Yeah, it's like, oh man.
And then when he sees Thor like using his powers and having his hammer and everything, and he walks up to him afterwards, he's like, Donald, I don't think you've been totally honest with me.
Yeah. Phil Coulson just totally. Again, you go back and you see these characters as they started, and then because as far as I'm concerned, some people they love the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. To me, they just like completely hooked up, Coulson's character in that show, which went off the rails. I think like somewhere around like season 3 or 4. I don't know.
No, it got better after that. I still watched it. I haven't caught up on the latest season, but yeah, I would still enjoy it.
That's what everybody keeps telling me. I figured that what I'm going to do is because I think this season is the last season.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to wait till it's over and then I'm going to go back and watch. Because as you know, I clocked out once. Because to me, it started being the Agents of Daisy show when the girl with what was her name? Sky?
Yeah.
That was her name, Sky. When the show started being, like all about her, and then they went through that whole fiasco with the Inhumans.
Well, that was the thing. It's because the problem with that is that when Marvel Studios and Marvel Television split, right? Because Kevin Feige originally, Marvel Studios was under the control of Ike Perlmutter, who owns Marvel and sold it to Disney. And when he sold it to Disney, it was with the understanding that he would basically get to keep his job for life. And Kevin Feige hated working with Perlmutter, and he threatened to leave. And then Bob Iger smartly is like, we can't lose Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
So we've got this agreement with Perlmutter, we can't get rid of him. So Iger wisely said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to move Marvel Studios over and make it its own separate company under a corporate umbrella instead of having it being a Marvel subsidiary. So then when they did that kind of screwed up the cohesion between the movies and the TV shows because Marvel Television was still under the Marvel Entertainment banner. So Perlmutter, was pissed off that he no longer had any control or any say in the movies. So what he did was he tried to take the TV shows, further away from that. And so because of that, and he had this thing where he believed, because Fox had the X-Men rights, and Perlmutter, brain trust that he is, thought that the Inhumans and the X-Men were basically the same thing. So he thought, well, we don't need mutants. We can just use the Inhumans instead.
Yeah, the Inhumans.
So that's why he was pushing for an Inhumans movie, and I don't think anybody else really had any serious consideration for it. And then when he had full control over, that's why he pushed the Inhumans so hard on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then when they did the Inhumans TV show and it failed miserably, at that point he kind of conceded. It's like, all right, fine. And then he let them take Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the directions they wanted to go. And then we got more interesting stuff. Like they had Ghost Rider in there. They had the They had the whole stuff with the LMDs. Like, it become a lot more interesting after that.
Because I don't know, have you ever watched the Inhumans show? Did you
Yeah,
ever watch it?
I watched it. Yeah, it was not good.
Yeah, I didn't even bother watching because you know what? I love the Inhumans so much. I said, you know what? I don't want to see it and be disappointed. And I cannot think of anybody who recommended that show. So I said, yeah, well, it must be pretty bad. Nobody thought it was any good.
No. And I don't really care much for the Inhumans to begin with. So, like, there was nothing tying me to that show at all.
He said, you didn't give a poobah spizzle about it.
No, not at all. Like, I only watched it because it was a Marvel thing, but I'm just like,
yeah.
Not. And I sat through all, what was it, like 6 episodes, and just like, nope, this is not that good at all. All right. Also, and I love how Thor refers to Coulson as son of Cole.
Son of Cole, yeah. But, you know, that was one of the things that I liked about their relationship, because after a while, Thor and Coulson really did get to be pretty good friends.
Well, that's the nice thing. I remember, yeah, because I was watching that scene. I was thinking about the first Avengers movie. And, you know, Coulson is really the only character in that movie that Thor confides in.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that carries over to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when Sif appears, because she guest starred on like 2 episodes. And she has this respect and reverence for Coulson because of what she's heard from Thor.
From Thor, exactly, yeah. It's like, it's, I don't know. Phil Coulson, he still remains one of my favorite characters. No matter how my perception is that they hooked him up, he remains one of my favorite characters. And when he appeared in this movie, I was just smiling all over again. I said, damn, Phil Coulson, there you go. You know, it was just good to see him. And it was good to, you know what, it was really good to revisit this movie, because I have not seen this I don't think I've seen this in about, when was my last, because usually I will periodically do a rewatch of all of the MCU movies. I don't think I've rewatched it. Oh, I know it was when Endgame came out, because I watched all of the Marvel movies in order, you know, to get ready for Endgame. And that was the last time that I, you know, had watched Thor. And again, as with so many of these movies, which to me is a testament of how well they're made and how well they stand up, in that after about like a half hour, I forget I'm supposed to be watching this critically to be able to talk about it when we get together. And, you know, I'm into the movie. I'm watching it, you know, because I like watching the movie.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is Natalie Portman, because she took a lot of shit for her performance as Jane Foster, but I really like her in these movies.
I like her here, and you know what? Again, I am not really a big Natalie Portman fan. In most of her movies, like in the Star Wars movies, when she smiles, she looks like somebody that's trying to remember the right muscles to move in order to smile. And you know, there's a couple of things that I like her in, but I can't say that I'm really a Natalie Portman fan. But I like her in this movie. She seems like she's fresh and she's having fun. Which there's a lot of Natalie Portman movies. She doesn't look like she's having a good time.
Yeah.
In the movie, you know. I mean, as a character and as an actor, she doesn't look like she's having a good time making the movie. But in this one, it's like, yeah, you know, she's much more relaxed.
Right.
You know, she even gets some opportunities to be kind of silly. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's a completely different performance than what I'm used to seeing her in. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to the point of.
Right.
It's a different, you know, she's more relaxed.
Exactly. Yeah. Much more relaxed. And, but yeah, I liked her in this movie, and I like that they made her a physicist. An astrophysicist. It works really well for her character to have that connection, and that makes sense why she's investigating this.
Yeah, well, by making her astrophysicist, you know what? Because let's face it, if we had to go through all of that other stuff that you and I were talking about earlier with Dr. Don Blake, and he's on vacation in Norway, and Jane Foster's a nurse. That's too much Felgacarb to
Right.
bring into a movie. They do a lot of things with the characters in this movie that shortcuts
Yeah.
a lot of the BS so we can get to the story.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And making her an astrophysicist, yeah, that's one of them. It gives her a reason to be out there in the middle of the desert when, you know, Thor comes out of no place and the hammer lands. And it gives her a reason to keep on being involved because, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. comes and takes all of her research.
You know, I also like that they didn't put this in a typical place where you'd expect it to be, right? They didn't put it in New York like every single Marvel superhero lives in New York. And they didn't put it in another big city. They put it in this small town in New Mexico.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the way they did that.
Which gives it a completely different look.
Right.
You know, we're in a small town. There's not a lot of people, you know. And of course, because it's in a small town, we get scenes like that fun scene where everybody's trying to lift the hammer from where it's falling at.
Where we get Stan Lee's cameo in that one.
Where they attach a chain to it, and he's got a pickup truck.
And he loses the bumper, yeah.
He leans out, he said, "Did it work?" And everybody's laughing at him, all the guys. And all these guys standing around with beers in their hand, and they're just having a good time, just trying to lift this hammer, you know. And it's a great scene. It is. It's a lot of fun. I know that, you know, as we were saying earlier, I know that a lot of people, when they talk about, you know, their favorite movies, MCU movies, for some reason, the Thor movies, they always put them at the bottom of the heap, and I have no idea why. Especially this first one, because this first one really is, you know, it's in the tradition of those MCU movies that we've seen already, you know, and the ones that we say are the best ones, like, okay, the Captain America movie, the first one, the Iron Man movie, you know, this is, I mean, to me, this is one of the best and one of my favorite out of all MCUs. It is. I really enjoyed this movie.
And actually, you know who the finalist for the role of Thor was? Was Liam Hemsworth, Chris Hemsworth's brother.
Oh, okay. Who isn't bad himself.
No, but actually, it's funny. Like Hemsworth later said, you know, it was really funny that we both came all the way from Australia, and we find out that we're competing against each other for the same role.
Yeah, well, I think his brother is like almost, because what Hemsworth is what, like 6'4", 6'6", something like that. His brother's like a little bit. I think his brother's like a little bit like a little bit shorter. But what does it matter when you're that tall? I think he's like 2 inches shorter, something like that.
Well, also, Brad Pitt was rumored. Channing Tatum and Triple H were considered. Oddly enough, I don't know how this would work. Daniel Craig was the first choice. I don't know how the hell you get Daniel Craig as Thor.
You know what? I'm still trying to figure out how you got him as James Bond, but that's a whole other podcast.
And then Charlie Hunnam from Sons of Anarchy, Alexander Skarsgård.
Oh, okay.
Joel Kinnaman.
Alexander Skarsgård. Okay, I could see
Skarsgård.
that.
I could see, yeah.
Yeah, Skarsgård I could see.
Hiddleston as well. They all screen tested for the role. So did Liam Hemsworth. And then Chris is the one who got it. And you know what? I cannot think of anyone better, really. Well, like Skarsgård would have been good, but the thing about Thor is if you got someone who's just like, you know, a big muscle-bound guy, like Thor would not be endearing. You need to have someone who can have that arrogance but can still be charmingly arrogant. And that's the thing about Hemsworth is this guy just oozes charm in like everything he's in.
Well, yeah, you can see it in the scene when Jane Foster, you know, they take him out to breakfast.
Yeah, I love that scene.
And even though he's over there and he's smashing the coffee cups and everything like that, but he's being charming.
Yeah,
you know, even when he's being a total dick, he's still a charming dick.
Right, exactly. And that's a very hard thing to pull off. Like, you need to have that kind of natural career, like just like Downey has with Tony Stark, because Tony Stark is also an arrogant dick, but they both have a charm about them that allows them, that still makes you like them even when they're being a dick.
Because you know what it is? Even though they're being a dick, they're not being mean about it.
Right, yeah.
Because you can be a dick, but you can be a dick without being mean about being a dick, if that makes any sense.
No, yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we see in guys like Thor and then Tony Stark. And Thor is not a mean-spirited guy, first of all. You know, this is just something that he sees as his natural birthright, that he's supposed to have. Right. But through the course of this movie, he actually earns the right to, you know, carry the hammer and to be the king of Asgard and all that other stuff. He earns it. And matter of fact, we see that through his whole character arc, through all of the Thor movies and the Avenger movies and stuff like that. We see a Thor that learns and grows, and the lessons he learns in this movie is only enriched in every succeeding movie that we see him in.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. I think that's basically all we have to say about Thor. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Only that if you have not seen Thor yet, and I cannot imagine why, if you listen to this podcast, I would imagine that you have seen all of the movies that we've talked about already. But if you have not seen Thor, then that's your homework assignment for this weekend. I want you to go see Thor. If you have seen Thor, but you haven't seen it in like a couple of years, then your homework assignment for this week is to go watch Thor again.
Yeah. All right.
By all means. Of course, when you start doing that, then you probably end up watching other MCU movies, but hey, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
They're like potato chips. You know, you watch one and, you know, you want to watch another one.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, I think it's an underrated movie. Like, I remember even when the trailer came out, like, even people were like, I don't know how they're going to make Thor work. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to give him a chance. You won't know until you try it. And they made it. I think they made it work. I think they pulled it off more. Like, there's some things I think maybe they went a bit too much with the whole fish out of water bit with Thor, and I would have liked to see more stuff dealing with Asgard. But overall, I still like this movie. Yeah.
I have no problem with this movie at all. Yeah. I mean, like you, I would have liked to see more Asgard stuff, which we do get in The Dark World, which of course is the redheaded stepchild of all Thor movies.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to. I mean, I liked it, but apparently I'm the only one who did, because most people I know don't like The Dark World for reasons that totally escape me, and we will get into whenever we get around to doing.
No, I like it too, and I mean, it's not as good as the other movies, but I still enjoy it. And you know what? It's funny. I think it was like maybe last year or something. Not long after we saw Endgame. Kopno was like, I asked her, you want to watch something? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, what do you want to watch? You know, I'll usually ask her, give her, see if she wants to watch like any particular movie or if there's like any genre she wants to watch. And she's like, I want to watch The Dark World. I'm like, really? Okay. And I'm like, why? And she's like, well, because we saw Endgame and there was so much dealing with that in that movie, so I want to rewatch it. So we went back and rewatched it, and you know, we enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why I didn't, because like I said, I watched Thor last night. The only reason why I didn't watch the other two Thor movies, like one right after another, because it was so late at night. It was like 1:00 in the morning when I finished watching it. And I said, well, I had to get up early this morning. So otherwise, I probably would have sat there and I would have watched, you know, the next two, the Thor and, you know, I would have watched the other two, which I probably will watch this weekend. I'll probably watch both of them now that we've been talking about Thor so much. And I mean, you know, I watched it. And matter of fact, I have it on now while we're talking about this. I got the sound turned down. I got it on.
Yeah. All right. So that's about all we have to say about the first Thor movie. So that means, and this was your pick, so that means next week it's my pick again. And you know what? I thought we'd go back to the X-Men because Days of Future Past is on Disney Plus now.
Oh, okay.
So I thought this would be a good time to go back and have a look at X-Men Days of Future Past, which, you know, a lot of people consider one of the best, if not the best, movies in the X-Men series.
I had some knucklehead contact me on Instant Messenger and said, ha 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 ha. I said, what are you ha 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 about? Well, you guys blew it. You didn't cover the X-Men, for the anniversary. And I said, you dumb dick. I said, look at this. And I gave him a link to when we did the first X-Men movie. We did the first X-Men movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Okay. So yeah.
So I mean,
in fact, now there are actually two versions of this movie. So there's and I think the theatrical cut is the one that's most likely on Disney Plus. I haven't checked, but there's also an extended version of the movie, and that's the one. Which
one do you want to do?
I'm going to be doing the extended version. It's called the Rogue cut because this one actually had Rogue Anna Paquin had filmed a scene as Rogue, which was cut from the theatrical version. And so I want to go and I actually think it's a better movie because it deals with it has a better use of some stuff, and so it shows a little bit more of the future part. So I want to go back and I'm going to look at the Rogue cut.
Okay, well, no problem. I'll find the extended cut and we'll
Awesome, sounds good. So join us. Awesome. So join us next week. We'll be talking about the extended version of X-Men: Days of Future Past. And that about does it for us. Derrick, anything else you want to add before we sign off for the day?
Nope. That's it. As usual, I'd like to remind you, as always, the coronavirus is still out there. So everybody, please stay safe. Do not listen to the ignoramus in the White House that is telling you all the BS. Listen to scientists, listen to doctors, listen to health experts and specialists. These are the people that we should be listening to in this time. Watch a bunch of good movies, read some good books, and be good to each other.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that we're getting out of here now. So join us again next week. Be careful. Wear a mask, as Derrick said. Don't listen to that fucking dumbass piece of shit. And watch Thor over the weekend and watch X-Men: Days of Future Past so you can prepare for our next episode.
Yeah, by all means, yeah, definitely. I would hope that you guys, when that's one of the reasons why we announce what we're going to watch. This is one reason why we announce what we're going to do next week to give you opportunity so that you can watch it first and you can be ahead of us.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so that does it for now. Head on over to facebook.com, look for the Superhero Cinephiles group, join in the discussion. Also, we've got a PayPal donate button on the site, so if you don't want to commit to a Patreon subscription, then you can just toss us, $1 here and there, and every little bit helps us keep the lights on around here.
Yeah, and also if you are interested at all, because my wife, she listens to this and she tells me I should plug my stuff more. If you want to read more of my movie reviews, go to the Ferguson Theater. There are reviews of most of the movies that we've covered already, believe it or not. I've covered a lot of superhero movies as well as other movies in other genres, Western, science fiction, or whatever. So by all means, go check it out,
Exactly. All right, so that does it for now. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
Good night, and God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, or if you have a superhero movie or TV show you'd like us to cover in a future episode, you can email us at superherocinephiles@gmail.com, or you can also visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com. If you like what you hear, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Each review helps us reach more potential listeners. You can also support the show by renting or purchasing the movies discussed, or by picking up our books, all of which can be accessed through the website, as well as find links to our social media presences. The theme music for this show is a shortened version of Superhero Showdown, a royalty-free piece of music courtesy of BesleonStudios.com.